Today's show is brought to you by Drift Outfitters at 199 Queen Street East in downtown Toronto, Ontario. Drift Outfitters is packed full of fly fishing gear, tying materials, clothing, hats, bags, and more. Rob and the guys down at the shop have you covered for all your fly fishy needs. Whether you're taking a trip to Northern Ontario or heading on a massive journey to the heart of Africa to fish tigerfish on the Zambezi River, Drift Outfitters has got you. Stop by the shop at 199 Queen Street East or visit them online at driftoutfitters.com to take advantage of their fantastic online store and free shipping on Canadian orders over $100. Hello and welcome to another episode of So Fly. It is, what is it? It's like the end of February. It's still snowy as heck out here. We're in Guelph today on location, actually. My name is Mitch. We've got Yelma.
Hey, everyone.
We've got Aldo.
Hello.
And we're recording a really special guest today. Like I said, out in Guelph. We're here with currently the president of the Middle Grand Chapter of Trout Unlimited. We're here with Larry Halyk. How's it going, Larry?
Really good. Really good.
Really excited to be recording here at your house. It's a beautiful house. Mm-hmm. Out in Guelph. We just got stuck in a snowbank.
Yeah, I'm surprised we got here on time.
Yeah, me too.
I'm surprised you found the snowbank.
It was a close one.
We missed the turn off to your street, which beautiful house, by the way. It's like so bright. We're like, got the woods surrounding us. This is a nice setting for a podcast. But so Mitch pulled a U-turn.
Yeah.
And the snow was a lot deeper than
I thought. But yes, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, super excited to talk about all things fly fishing with you and also conservation and biology. Because what's a little bit about your background for the people listening?
Yeah, I was a biologist with the Ministry of Natural Resources and then later on a stewardship coordinator for 32 years. And I retired about 3 years ago. And I decided I better keep busy. So I really immersed myself in some of the conservation causes. As you said, I'm president of the Trout Unlimited chapter, and we've been doing a lot of great work in the Grand River. So that's the quick one.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Right.
The Coles Notes version.
The Coles Notes version, yeah.
So, okay, well, why don't we just go right back to then, let's start with like your fly fishing past and how you got into fly fishing. How long have you been fly fishing for?
Oh, my God. Since I was about 12 or 13, and I'm 65 now, so or I will be very soon. So it's been a long time. It's really interesting how I got into fly fishing because I grew up in an area south of here in farm country, and really I didn't have any mentors or anything like that. And but I was a real reader. My parents called me the bookworm, and I read. I went through the library and I found a fly fishing section, and I started reading there. And then my parents got me subscriptions to Field and Stream and Ontario, it was Outdoor Life. And those are American magazines, and a lot of them had a lot of fly fishing articles. So I really got into fly fishing before any of my friends in high school or public school did.
Yep.
So that's how I got into it.
The magazines, there's just something about I remember being a kid too and reading all those U.S. publications, and it's just like the allure of it,
Eastern fly fishing.
Yeah,
that's what I read a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, I go back a lot farther. Those specialty fly fishing magazines weren't even around. Like Fly Fisherman wasn't around, or any of those. So you had those fly fishing articles in Field and Stream, and some real personalities. There was a fellow by the name of Ted Trueblood, which is you can't get more outdoorsy than a name like that.
That's an awesome name.
And, they talked about, fishing for steelhead in Idaho and the Snake River and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was really romantic. And the other thing about those American magazines is it kind of confused me because they talk about pickerel.
Yeah.
And pickerel are actually, the Americans call pickerel they're a member of the pike family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really, every time somebody local in Ontario would say, I'm going pickerel fishing, I thought, they're going for these small pike.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were pickerel around because I wasn't really into the Ontario fishing scene at that time when I was young. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know about that. My thing was trout. So that's what I did.
Yeah. Do you remember your first fish on a fly rod?
Yeah, on a fly rod. It wasn't too exciting because it was, by that time I had been fishing, before that, of course, I'd fished the worm in the small little streams where I grew up. And Then I finally picked up fly fishing around 14, and there was a local stock pond, a gravel pit pond, Waterford Lakes, and so I caught a bunch of trout on the dry fly on that. But after that, I kind of graduated into stream fishing. So there was a creek called Whiteman's Creek, which is a tributary of the Grand.
Right.
And I used to ride my bike there and fish for browns there. And so that's how I really got into fly fishing for trout.
That's awesome. It's a pretty big pike in Waterford ponds too, eh?
Yeah. It's kind of a cool place. A lot of bass and pike.
Yeah.
And a lot of, and the area I grew up, bass and pike were big. I mean, Long Point Bay is not far from where I lived, and great bass fishing.
Yeah.
And but I did a little bit of bass fishing, but I really, again, maybe because of just all the reading I did, I really gravitated towards trout.
Yeah.
And eventually steelhead.
Yes, eventually steelhead.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, you have a fisheries biology background.
Yeah.
That's what you did professionally.
Yeah. And I got into that because I think just my love of fishing.
Yeah.
I decided somewhere in high school that I wanted to be a fisheries biologist, and I really stuck to it because I was actually discouraged a lot by the guidance counselors and everything. Saying it's really hard to get a job there, and it was, and it's even worse now.
Yeah.
And I just decided that no, that's what I want to do. I'm kind of an introvert by nature, so my idea of being a biologist was I would go out in the woods all day by myself or the streams and never see another person, and that would be okay with me.
Yeah.
And I would just collect data and come back to the office.
Sounds awesome.
And that would be great.
Yeah.
But I didn't kind of realize that, due to Peter Principle or whatever you want to call it, eventually fisheries management is people management. It really is. So you've got to work with people.
Right.
So I kind of became, from an introvert, you kind of become a reluctant extrovert after a while because you got to give presentations, you got to run meetings, you got to resolve conflicts, you've got to work with people. Mm-hmm. And you kind of fake it till you make it. I really didn't at first, wasn't good at it, and didn't enjoy it. But eventually you just you enjoy working with people and making some positive things happen, and that's kind of the way it evolves.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember. Yeah, I mean, it's cool that your fly fishing life and your fishing and outdoors life was able to influence your career path. Yeah,
and it's kind of interesting because I have a hard time separating my work and my passion. And I know when I finally did retire, I immersed myself in the conservation stuff. And my wife said to me, "Well, you're not getting paid for any of this stuff. You're doing the same stuff you did before you were while you were working, and you're not getting paid for this." And I said, "Well, I couldn't believe I was getting paid when I was working."
Yeah, exactly.
So
totally.
The job doesn't pay extremely well, but boy, is it ever rewarding.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So were you, in your work, like, I know you're now involved in the Middle Grand chapter and focusing on the Middle Grand, which we'll definitely talk about. Was that where your work took you as well, like originally, or where?
Well, it hopped around. I mean, I spent much of my career working on the Grand.
Okay.
I was involved in, the Grand River Fisheries Management Plan.
Mm-hmm.
I even when I was with the Lake Erie unit, because I was the senior manager for the Lake Erie unit assessment unit for a while, or management unit. But I spent, I would say, the bulk of my career on the Grand. Some of the things I'm most proud of are related to the Grand. I was involved in, I basically was the M&R biologist who started the tailwater fishery in the
amazing,
in the Fergus-Loire area.
Wow.
And I remember when it happened, it was 1988-89, and I was getting a lot of pushback at the time. Warren Yerrick's, who's a good friend of mine and a biologist with the Grand River Conservation Authority, when I first started working in this area, he started showing me the temperature data, and he said, "Look at this, Larry. This is good." And the Grand River Conservation Authority was stocking rainbow trout there for a number of years, and they were like 10, 12-inch rainbow trout that would disappear by mid-June. They would be gone.
Yeah.
And the two of us looked at each other and said, we can do better than that. And there were a few other people involved. I'm not going to take total credit, but there was Jack Imhoff was involved. A fellow by the name of Walt Crawford was involved, and but I was kind of the point man for M&R because it was an M&R stocking program. And I remember going to my regional biologist, and he kind of looked at me and shook his head and said, well, why do you want to do that? And well, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got it started, and I think the first stocking was 1989 of the Browns. And then shortly after that, working with Walt Crawford and others, we got the catch and release regulations in a couple of years after that.
Amazing.
Wow, that's awesome.
Oh, wow.
So we have you to thank for the Grand River.
Well, no, you got a number of people to thank.
I was you
involved.
alone.
No.
Certainly part of a big
movement.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the Grand. It's all been interactions of positive interactions with people. With the fisheries management plan, the same thing. With starting the steelhead fishery, when we removed the dam on the Lorne Dam in Brantford in 1989, it was myself and Warren and a few others who really pushed the city of Brantford into why do you need this dam? It's not doing anything.
Yeah.
And of course, back then, dam removal was the movement hadn't really started like it has now. And in my opinion, in Ontario, it needs to get started even more. But
Right.
But at that time, people were very attached to dams, and I can remember the public meetings at the time, and everybody said, "Oh, it's going to be a big mud flat above there, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to be terrible." And we got the dam removed, and good things happened. I mean, the river really
came back.
It came to life.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why the steelhead were able to get up there because that was blocking the run mainly. So. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, with the Grand River then, maybe it'd be cool just to chat a little bit about some of the issues facing the Grand, because there are still some issues obviously facing the Grand and the fisheries, right?
Yeah.
I mean, dams you touched on.
Yeah. The kind of a good news, bad news thing. First of all, when you really look back in my career, when I first started on the Grand and I can recall in the 70s, water quality was not as good as it is now. I remember when there was a big fish kill in Guelph on the Speed River, and Pete Mason, the biologist at the time, he called me out, and we saw a lot of dead bass and pike, and he was really excited. He was actually thrilled, and I went, Pete, there's a whole bunch of dead fish here. Why are you so happy?
Yeah.
And he said, well, yeah, Larry, 10 years ago, we wouldn't have seen these bass and pike. They would have been just carp. And
right.
so he was pumped that the water quality was good enough to support sport fish at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the 60s and 70s, the water quality was really bad. And a lot of the sport fish we're seeing on the Grand weren't even around. The bass fishing wasn't that good.
Mm-hmm.
And so, through, mostly upgrades of sewage treatment plants, that's really helped. And, we've got a pretty good water quality now. But the threats, getting back to your question, the threats are, growth, humans. I mean, this is a really rapidly growing area. And it's urbanizing. Mm-hmm. And agriculture is changing, some ways for the good, some ways for the bad. So agriculture is more intensive. So there's the potential for more nutrients to get into and sediment to get into the system. Mm-hmm. Not that there aren't, farmers are great stewards of the land, and we've really seen some improvements due to great farming practices. But we got to be careful. There's a lot of threats, and it's mainly people. In terms of harvest and fishing pressure, that can be managed, and we have some pretty good management in the Grand that happened about 20 years ago, and I think it's really helping to maintain the fishery.
So if the water quality was bad in the 60s and 70s, what was it that improved it? How did it flip?
Well, mainly there was the Clean Water Act in the States, but it was an international agreement in the 70s that talked about, reducing phosphorus in the Great Lakes.
Right.
And so as a result of that, a lot of the sewage plants got upgraded. So a lot of the sewage treatment plants from the cities, the water quality just improved. Mm-hmm. And it's still continuing to improve. But it's got a little ways to go yet. I mean, a good friend of mine who's a prof at University of Waterloo, Mark Servos, was doing a study on rainbow darters, and he was finding that rainbow darter reproduction was going down because the males were turning into females because of all of the chemicals that
Jeez.
the sewage treatment plants could not remove at the time.
Whoa.
That's crazy.
And so he was really seeing these feminization, as he called it, of these little male darters. And these darters are only like 4 inches long.
Yeah.
And more recently, in the last 5 years or so, there have been some upgrades in these sewage treatment plants, and that is reversing. So we're seeing some improvements there.
Okay.
But again, we got to keep on guard here.
Yeah.
So what is that?
Yeah.
Is that going to happen with the other sort of species of fish? We have the rainbow darters changing,
Yeah.
feminizing. Is that like a threat for other?
Yeah, you look at these fish as indicators, and I always say trout is a great indicator because it needs cold, clean water. So it's kind of the miner's canary if you look at certain species. The rainbow darters are a great indicator because they're very sedentary. They don't move around. They spend their whole lives within 100 meters of a stream. Mm-hmm. So if you've got them below a outfall of a sewage treatment plant, that's what you got. They're staying there. So they're great indicator species. But, we're seeing in the Grand, like the walleye fishery is really improving now. And we don't know what's going on, but we've had some great year classes of walleye in the lower Grand. And it could be due to some of these upgrades in sewage treatment plants. We don't know. The data aren't there to
Right.
prove it. But, these things happen in subtle ways.
Yeah.
And we're really not, thanks to people like Mark who are on top of this and are researching it, but we could use a lot more research to kind of look at what's going on.
Yeah.
Is would you say research is something that Trout Unlimited would take on? Is that something they can take on, have the capacity to? Or
Not hardcore research, no. Right. I think our chapter and most Trout Unlimited chapters, we collect information to monitor the success of our projects. So we're doing it at a much more different level. We're not doing pure research or collecting anything that could be published in a scientific journal. But what we do is we'll go out and measure the width of a stream and the depth and some of the basic channel morphology. And we'll do it before and after, and we find out, well, before it was 3 meters wide and 10 centimeters deep and sand and no cover. We came back and we did the work, and now it's much deeper, it's much narrower, and there's gravel bottom instead of sand. Mm-hmm. That tells us we're doing something good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just all a process, right? You said the threats are people, so it's just, is it a case-by-case kind of thing, like fixing the problems? It's just kind of...
Well, it can be, but to be effective, you really need to step back and look at the big picture and don't treat the symptoms. You look at the problems.
Right.
And there's no sense repairing an eroding bank if the problem is a big problem due to flooding and massive land use changes. And unless you fix those bigger problems, you're just putting a Band-Aid on a big wound. So you really do need to step back. And one of the reasons that I'm kind of stepping back, speaking of stepping back as president, is of our chapters. We've got a great executive. They're young, they're keen, and very knowledgeable. And it's time for someone else to be president. And I can maybe step back and look at some of the strategic planning, and whether you want to, I'm still going to stay on, maybe a planning director or a science director or something like that, to look at the big picture and come up with this list of best bets projects that would be most effective in the landscape.
So you're stepping back from being, how long have you been president of the chapter?
5 years.
Okay.
So the chapter got reconstituted in 2014. It was after a bit of a hiatus. The chapter had been started some years before that, but then as things happen with volunteers, it kind of fizzled a little bit, and we started again in 2014. So it's been 5 years.
Okay, awesome.
what is the bulk of the work that Middle Grand focuses on? Like, what areas does that constitute for?
Yeah, the Middle Grand, and we define it as kind of the reach of the Grand River between, let's say, Cambridge and Brantford, and
Gotcha.
And that includes the Nith River, and that is really we call it the kind of the renewal zone of the Grand River, because you've got above that, you've got all of these sewage treatment plants and population and people. And, and then you've got below Cambridge, you've got this massive amount of groundwater that comes into the system.
Really?
And it really refreshes and rejuvenates the river. We've got, nice, cold, clean water coming in.
Yeah.
And it tends to restore the river. So that's why that section of the Grand is so cool, because it, that middle Grand right between Brantford and Paris, it's a warm water river. It's a bass river, walleye, pike, but it also can support trout. And because of that groundwater, some of those pools stratify, and you've got cold water in the bottom, and there's trout living in the Grand all year round down there.
Yeah.
And, if you know what you're doing, you can go fish it in May and June. There's great hatches. There's Hendrickson hatches, sulfurs, and that Isonychia. And you can do very well with resident rainbow trout that really, it's kind of reminiscent of the Delaware River tailwater. And,
Right.
It's very technical.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
It's
Layers.
It's not easy. I've given presentations at different clubs, and people go down there and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no trout here, or you really got to study it. You got to be there for the hatches. You got to know what you're doing. And then even if you see a rising trout, boy, they're educated.
Yeah.
And they just won't.
Smart fish.
Yeah, they won't take a size 12 Royal Coachman, thrown at them. They'll look at it. Is that an emerger? Is that, what is it? They really have their PhD in entomology.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, technical river. That's a good way to put it, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that stretch I remember the first time I fished that stretch was definitely for bass. It's still one of my favorite stretches on the Grand for bass, I think. I mean, it's fun going to
Paris is fun too.
Paris is fun,
Yeah.
like that whole region. But yeah, it'd be kind of fun to start trying to target that for rainbows. Yeah. I mean, I fish Whiteman's for sure, but
yeah. And I get people sometimes they kind of say, well, why are you sharing this information? And you guys may get some flack for this thing going out and saying, well, no, why are you letting all these people know about this? I always say, as a biologist and a stewardship coordinator, I've always said, rivers need friends.
More stewards.
100%.
And that section of river is catch and release anyway. It's artificials only, catch and release. It's not fly fishing only. It's artificials only. And there is some illegal harvest going on a little bit, I'm sure, but generally it's the numbers are really showing that we're seeing more trout in that section, and it's because of the regulations, I think.
Yeah, totally.
When did those regs go in for that stretch?
That was 2001, and that was another project I was involved in. I did not lead that one because at the time I was with the Lake Erie unit, but I certainly was involved in that through the fisheries management plan. Yeah.
And are those naturalized rainbows, or is there a stocking program there?
No, there's no stocking of trout in that section of the Grand, and so those are all naturalized rainbow trout. They're not native, of course. They're naturalized, and they've been there for decades. They were probably there before we removed the Lorne Dam, and that's probably why the Grand got colonized by steelhead so quickly, because there was already a seed source. And this is a theory. I don't have data to prove this,
right.
But there probably were. I know when I was a kid in the 70s, I was catching rainbow trout in Whiteman's Creek, and I'm sure that some of those fish are the seed source and the genetic source for the rainbow trout we've got there now, which are a great rainbow trout because you've got early run steelhead, you've got resident rainbows, and the two will intermingle. I think if you go walk the creeks in the spring, you'll see these residents spawning with the steelhead, which is what they do in the West Coast too.
It's pretty cool. That's pretty rad.
That is cool.
How did steelhead come into your life?
Well, it wasn't fly fishing at first, and my grandfather introduced me to fishing, and it was again mostly fishing with gear and bait in small streams, and that's what I did for a number of years. And then my mother talked my dad into taking the kid out fishing because he was more of a hunter than a fisherman.
Yeah.
And he started getting into fishing, and he gravitated towards steelhead because as a hunter, he basically liked to hunt steelhead.
Yeah.
And so we would go to Big Creek and Young Creek, some of the local creeks down there, and fish spawn bags, of course, and catch steelhead. And it's really interesting because even though as my teenage years, I really got into fly fishing for trout, I didn't really get into hardcore fly fishing for steelhead until, probably the early 1990s. Up until then, through the 70s and 80s, I was a float fisherman. I had a center pin, like everybody else, and went to the Maitland, the Saugeen, all of those, and got pretty good at it. And I can remember in the 1980s, you would go to the Big Head River, and you would have 50 fish days.
Jeez.
It was hard to fly fish for steelhead when you were catching that many.
Totally.
on gear.
Yeah.
And so it was an evolution. Like after a while, you kind of go, you know what? I can't remember the 24th steelhead I caught.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, that's it. I finally figured out I would take the fly rod along, and it was I would never use it.
Yeah.
And the fishing got good. I wouldn't go back to the car and get the fly rod.
Just keep going.
I just keep going. I got greedy, right? And finally, after a while, it's just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I would only bring the fly rod out if the fishing was bad, which is a sure recipe for failure. You're not going to catch if you can't catch them on a center pin.
Yeah.
It's tough to get them swinging. It really is.
For sure.
So eventually, I learned that I would go out and it was a really good day, and I landed 3 steelhead in the first half hour, and I said, you know what? I'm going back up to the car and get the fly rod and that's when I started really believing in myself. It's all about confidence.
Yeah.
And after I started catching a few on the fly rod, I thought, this is more fun anyway.
Yeah.
And a good day with swinging with a fly rod, a good day is 3 or 4 fish, but you can remember every fish. You can remember every detail.
More special.
I couldn't do that when I was center pinning and I landed 20 fish. I couldn't remember,
No.
Number 23, number 24. No, I couldn't remember it. And it wasn't, and as you get to be my age, memories and experiences become so much more important. So that's kind of what happened.
Your good days are so different than my good days.
Well, no, I mean, to be real here, I mean, a good day for me swinging flies for steelhead is a fish.
Yeah.
Is a fish. It still is.
Yeah.
And and actually sometimes it's a good day is no fish.
Yeah.
So So
swinging's always fun, like especially in the fall. You're outside. It's just there's something about swinging flies in the fall. It's just fun no matter what.
it really is, and you get into this Zen state, and you cast step, and my 2 older boys got into swinging flies for steelhead pretty late. It's only been a couple of years now, and they really got into it because they're both paramedics, and it's a stressful job. And they are always looking for stress relief, and the meditative state you get into when you're swinging a fly is something that they really value, and we all enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it. Just making it more special. It's more special on a fly rod because you remember the fish, and it's just so much more. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
In my career, I mean, even as a biologist, I've handled a lot of fish. I mean, I've sampled them. I mean, how many more fish do I need to have in my hands?
Yeah,
I don't.
Yeah.
I'm done with that. I just want the experience. So,
I mean, first time I fished the Grand was with you, Mitch. Mitch fishes the Grand. Would you say that's your favorite steelhead water around here?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's pretty accessible from Toronto, and I've fished it with my uncle who knows it really well. So it's just that piece of water I've gotten to know, But it's just it's good swinging water,
It is good swinging water, and also it's
got a lot of room.
It's good early in the season, like a lot of our rivers, like the Maitland. And the Maitland is a wonderful river. I mean, it's so picturesque. It's beautiful.
That was Yilma's first steelhead was on the Maitland.
Oh yeah.
On the swing.
Nothing better. I mean, it is one of the prettiest rivers in
Yeah.
the Great
Yeah.
Lakes. And so I love swinging for steelhead on the Maitland, but the trouble with the Maitland is it doesn't have the water very often early in the fall, like late September, October. Usually October they start to come in because you get some water, but you got to wait for that water to come.
Yeah.
And by then the water is really cold. And so the fish aren't as aggressive. And I find with the Grand, because they come so early, and they have to come early because of the Caledonia Dam.
Yeah.
And I can talk about that in a second, but they come so early, and so they're there at optimal temperatures, and they're aggressive and they're grabby. So you don't need the dredge. You don't need to put a big
No.
tip on.
They'll hit a dry line.
They'll hit a dry line, and in fact, they'll hit a dry fly. And
Yeah.
I've caught a number of steelhead on a dry fly. Very often, in early mid-September, I'll practice for my BC trip because I like fishing dry line in BC. So I'll go to the Grand and I'll put on a dry fly or a Walter Waker or something, and I'll wake that fly, and lo and behold, I'll get a steelhead.
That's pretty cool.
And
That would be so awesome.
so in fact, some years my luck is better on the Grand than it is out west.
Yeah.
For the surface
Yeah.
surface takes. I don't know why that is, but
So you're saying when they come in the river
Wow.
early on, they're aggressive, they're hungry, and they're just in. I guess they're in like go up the river mode, right?
well, they're not hungry. They don't. I don't think food is their motivation, but
Okay.
they're just aggressive. Like the temperatures are just right for them, so they're
Right.
they're ready to go, and they come up there, and they're very trouty because they're wild steelhead. They're not hatchery fish, so they're not used to eating trout pellets or
Yeah.
anything like that. So they're used to chasing caddis flies and stoneflies and
Yeah.
looking for mayflies. So they're looking in that water column and they're looking up.
Right.
And so if something is swinging, 6 inches below the surface, and it's like a traditional wet fly, they're going to probably come over and take a look.
So they're like acting like a trout when they come back in.
Yeah, and they'll move some distance for that fly.
Yeah.
And you don't have to put it right in front of them. Like when the water gets colder, they get less aggressive, and you got to put a tip on and you got to swing it right in front of them.
Right.
And very often your line just stops because
Yeah.
they just kind of open their mouth and grab it.
Yeah.
Whereas these early fall takes, I mean, it's usually they're just ripping off your line is your reel is just screaming.
And their fins are almost see-through.
Yeah. So there is a difference. It really makes a difference when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when's your favorite time then to fall steelhead? Is it that period, that
Yeah.
early period?
September, October.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy, it's great weather. It's comfortable. And it used to be that there weren't that many anglers out, but I think people have figured it out now. And so you get a lot of people in the early fall. It used to be on the Grand when the regulation first opened in 2001 that you could fish up above Brantford. There weren't too many people fishing it. So it was great because you could experiment. What I would do was I would go to one of the more popular pools. And, it wasn't popular at that time. And I would fish through once with a dry fly.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would fish it with a dry line. And then I would put on a tip and I would fish it a third time, dredging. And most of the time they would get, most of my takes would be subsurface. But enough of them would happen on top that it was worth my while to do that. But now I go down there in early October, and if I've got the pool to myself, it's like I just better put a tip on and fish it because someone's going to be here in about 10 minutes.
I know.
And so I kind of miss those days where I could kind of casually fish the river.
Relax.
I know it's tough, Because we talk about, well, first of all, we're a podcast. We tell people there's fish in the rivers. It's good, blah, 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 like we were talking about earlier.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, enjoy it. And we're, more people on the river, more people want to take care of it. And blah, blah, blah. But then there is that other thing where there's so many people that it's like, you can't fish the same way, that you used to. It's kind of like, I don't know,
Well, I think the onus is on us too as anglers. I mean, if I really want to, you can still find solitude.
Mm-hmm.
You have to walk, you gotta, or look around or get look at Google Maps or Google Earth and find some spots that are hard to get to. And I still do that. And they're not the most probably there's not as many fish there because everybody knows where the staging areas are. I mean, there's a few pools that there's always fish there. But you can go to these other spots and there may or may not be a fish there, but at least you'll be alone and you'll, again, what are you there for?
Yeah.
I'm there to just relax.
Exactly.
And
Meditate.
contemplate.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always go and try to find a fish after if you really want, right?
Yeah, and I've done that. I mean, you can high grade pools. You can go if you know the river well enough. You can go, into the bucket of the pool and fish that, and then run to the next pool and fish the bucket, and
Right.
and your hooking percentage will go way up. But that's a lot of work, and it's not as contemplative as the way I like to fish.
From your experience, more anglers on the river, good, bad? Is that a good thing or a bad? Like, what are these anglers? What is it? What are they like?
It's good and bad. I mean, first of all, I would say if you're talking about the Grand and the section I'm familiar with, which is between Paris and Brantford, it's busy. I would say on the whole, most of the anglers are fairly well behaved and courteous with each other. I mean, yeah, you get low hold, and by low hold I mean people stepping in below you if you're swinging a fly.
Right.
And you can share. You do have to share the water with other anglers who maybe center pinners and that kind of thing. But I find generally in that area, everybody is pretty courteous and considerate of others. And everybody's got a bad story, but it's not too bad. And if it's, and pool rotation is working fairly well in that area. I mean, that pool rotation is where you step into the top of the pool and you work your way down, and then the next person comes along and steps in above you and rotates through the pool. And that area it's kind of got a reputation for people rotating through pools in a fairly good manner. So it's not too bad. You go to other rivers and that doesn't happen. And, and then there are other rivers and other spots that, there are conflicts between, let's say center pinners and fly fishers, but you got to understand where you are. I mean, I can go below Denny's Dam.
Yeah.
And we've actually got a cottage up there, and I used to fish that area in the 80s a lot. And I don't fish there much anymore because it's really doesn't suit my fishing style. But I'm not complaining, and I'm not going to go in there and complain about somebody low-holing me because that's just the way it is. I mean, Denny's Dam is Denny's Dam, and that's just the way it is. So don't expect to go in there and then complain about getting low-holed because that's their water. I mean, and I did it for decades, so I can relate. It's you just know where to go.
Yeah, there's something to be said about expectations and the culture. Like I think if there is that culture of rotation, like other people on the river, like it's not really a big deal. Like when I was in the gas base swinging for salmon, that culture's ingrained, right?
Yes,
and it's actually kind of fun. You swing through the pool with people, and then more often than not, nobody's caught anything, right? Even though you can see the fish, and then you all kind of like just stop and chill, and obviously the water's cold, so taking a break isn't the worst thing in the world, and you're all chatting, maybe having a coffee or whatever. Like there's a bit of a camaraderie on the riverbank, so there's something to be said about like if there's anglers, but the culture's there. Like I don't think it's a big deal.
I think
it can be part of the fun or experience. Yeah.
Like I was recently in the Margaree in Nova Scotia, in the in the Cape Breton, and what a wonderful river. And most of the pools have benches,
right?
Exactly,
and people will sit down, and the people there are so friendly and so generous with their knowledge and their time, and they're pulling out their fly boxes and handing you flies, and it's just so it's fun, and it's makes the trip memorable, and so. That kind of civilized fishing, if you will, is a lot of fun. I've often thought our chapter, wondering whether we should put some benches in on some of the popular pools of the Grand, but the spring floods may just wipe them right out. So
True.
That would be tough to do, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, I was on the Petit Cascapedia, and there's benches, and like you get a little sandwich on the bench, and
it's
awesome.
Great.
It's great. Like maybe same thing as Steelhead is. There's not that many secret flies or whatever. It's like you're not, you know what I mean? Like they might take a temple dog, they might not take it. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not like there aren't. I don't know.
Totally.
It's Steelhead,
Yeah.
They might take a woolly bugger.
What I try to do, and again, you can be social and find out what everybody else is fishing, and just try to fish something completely different than everybody else is.
That's a good way to look at it.
Because then, if you're fishing behind someone else, you can, and let's say 4 people in a row, especially for steelhead, black and purple, right? So they've got these black and purple, intruder type flies. Then maybe put on a small Lady Caroline or something, size, size 8 or 10 or something small, and see what happens.
Yeah, you never know, right? Just be different, and especially if you're going through the pool third. Or
I've definitely landed steelhead for people, and that's a fun moment too.
Wait, you've like
people I don't know.
People you don't know?
Yeah, and like that's a fun moment too. It's like you ask them if they want help, because not everybody always wants it, but if I'll always take it personally. Like why not?
Sure.
Like I want to see this fish. Yeah. So it can be good and bad, but I think if you build that culture, it could be actually something that enhances the experience.
Yeah, my experience with steelhead's been pretty good. There's only one time where I felt like a center pinner went right in front of me. It was like literally 2 feet in front of me. But then again, I don't go there anymore. It's not one of my favorite spots, and I'm not going to go there to complain. I think it's a great mindset.
Yeah.
I think we need to stick together as anglers. I mean, there's the center pin tribe and the swing and fly tribe, and we all, we have a lot in common.
Oh yeah,
totally.
And I know from my career, I've worked a lot with kind of the steelheader groups, which tend to be center pinners or gear fishermen, and I'll tell you, over the years, I can't think of a more dedicated group of conservationists. I mean, when we were working on Young Creek in the 1980s, it was the Brantford Steelheaders, and I just need to pick up the phone and call. And it's like, how many guys do you need? We're in. We're in. And I don't.
That's awesome.
I don't try to differentiate between gear and center pin and fly. We all want the same thing. And
totally.
And in our chapter, we've got fly fishers, we've got center pinners, we've got non-anglers.
Yeah.
Oh,
really? Just people that care about
they just care about the resource, and they get it. They know that healthy fish populations just mean a healthy ecosystem.
Yeah.
So
Could we go back to that point about the Caledonia Dam that you said we were starting to talk about? Yeah. So what about the Caledonia Dam?
Well, the Caledonia Dam is kind of it's probably the reason that the steelhead run so early in the Grand, because it's a fairly high dam. If you've ever seen it, it's about, I don't know, close to 3 meters high, 2.5 meters. And it's 45-degree angle, kind of the apron. And so it's got 2 fish ladders or 2 fishways on it, but the fishways never really worked very well. And so in order for the steelhead to get up over Caledonia Dam, they have to either jump it, clear it, which is a huge task, or they jump onto it and they swim over the dam. And it's
amazing.
It to see them do that is just so amazing. And these things will jump 4 feet up into the dam or halfway up the dam, and then they will churn their way up for the rest of the way. And it's just like pure power. Yeah. And so you've got genetic selection going on right there. You've got basically, it's like the strongest survive. If you can't get over that dam, then you are not allowed to spread your gene to the next generation. So when you think about it, you've got generation after generation of strong, big steelhead, and they've got to run early because steelhead and all fish are cold-blooded. They have to run in when the temperatures are suitable. Well, there's a metabolic window where they can't get over that dam, and that metabolic window probably below about 7 degrees Celsius, they can't get over the dam. They can't their metabolism won't let them do it. Well, when does it get that cold? Somewhere in early November. And so, just when the runs in the Maitland are just starting to go, the door is closing on the Grand. So
it's crazy, eh?
Yeah. So those fish, I'm not going to say they know it because that's kind of anthropomorphizing, but they basically say, if you want to lay your eggs, you got to get over that dam, and you got to do it now.
Right.
And so those things are just turbocharged, and you basically, as soon as the water levels drop, water temperatures drop in the fall, those fish are thinking, okay, I got to get over that dam.
Yeah.
And there they go. they're moving up.
That's cool.
Super steelhead.
Yeah, and it's amazing. We're calling them steelhead, and anybody from the West Coast will be saying, "What? They're not steelhead. They don't go to the ocean. They're not saltwater." But they're genetically from steelhead stock when they were, when steelhead were transported here 100 years ago. It's from that material, genetic material. So they're steelhead by genetics, and 100 years or 50 years or even 20 years of that kind of selective evolution will do something to a fish. And we're already seeing it in the Great Lakes. If you look at it, and I have friends who are geneticists who have looked at different populations in Ontario, whether it's, the Maitland, the Nottawasaga has been pretty well studied, and the Grand. They're different genetically. They're very different genetically because they have to be, because every river is different.
Right, they face different pressures and
temperature swings.
Yeah, but again, I want to stress they're not native. They're naturalized. I mean, we only have one stream trout, and it's not even a trout; it's a char. But the brook trout is our only native trout in Ontario. I mean, there are lake trout, which are a little farther north than southern Ontario, but
naturalized. Yeah, I mean, people always talk about that, like steelhead, West Coast versus Great Lakes. I mean, like you said, genetically they are, but they're also different. I mean, Great Lakes steelhead are different. Like you say, they face different things. It's a different, but that doesn't mean it's worse. It just means it's different.
Yeah, and after a while, I really enjoy steelheading in the Great Lakes, and I respect it and I love it, and they're very unique. But in a way, it's kind of an illusion in that it's an artificial situation because man brought them here. So I always craved, I want to go fish for steelhead in their native range.
Which you do annually, right?
And I finally did about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've been going every year, and I'll keep going until I can't, I can't step into a plane or into a boat because it is so cool.
Yeah.
And I guess as a biologist, to be able to fish for a native fish in its native range, and you've got this creature in its hands, and then for thousands of years, that fish has evolved and has made that journey from the ocean, and it could have been off Kamchatka, it could have been anywhere.
Yeah.
And it came, and I've got it in my hands, and that's kind of moving when you do that. It's where it belongs.
Yeah. I mean, you've been smiling when you talk about steelhead in Ontario, and smiling about when you mentioned out west, but it got significantly larger smile when you talked about out west. So
it is.
I'm noticing. Yeah, and I guess I know the difference, but like to you, what other than I know it's a different run. It's a different adventures the steelhead is taking to get up those rivers than you'd see in a freshwater steelhead out here. But what are other differences? What makes it so exciting out there?
Well, again, I guess because I'm a biologist, I'm a bit nerdy about the fact that these fish have evolved in that area. So you can go across Western North America from northern BC down to California, all the way down to Baja, and those steelhead have all adapted to slightly different things. And if you go to Southern California, Malibu Creek and some of those rivers on kind of just north of Los Angeles, those steelhead are small. They really rely on the resident component because some years the steelhead can't even get up the rivers because of droughts. Jeez. And so you've got this gene pool of resident fish way up in the Sierra Mountains that are kind of hanging on until every 3 or 4 years those steelhead can finally bust through that barrier beach and get up into spawn. So that's kind of the one extreme. And then you go up to northern BC where those fish, the water's cold, it's a harsh environment. It takes 4-5 years to grow what they call a smolt, which is a juvenile steelhead that is ready to go to the ocean. It takes 4 or 5 years in some of those rivers for that to get to the ocean, and then they get out there and they come back. So completely different life history strategies, but again, it just shows you how plastic steelhead are in terms of their adaptability.
Yeah.
I mean, steelheading in LA, imagine. That's such an interesting.
Well, I don't know if you've ever. It's not LA, but there was that movie Rivers of a Lost Coast. which is talks about steelhead in I guess Northern California.
Right.
And it's really worth watching because it's a cautionary tale. It basically, this could happen to you sort of thing. They took the fishery for granted. They overharvested it. They dammed the rivers. They took water for irrigation. And those steelhead are starting to come back in the last 10 years. But, the heydays, they lost those fish that were there in the 40s and 50s. It was, they just took it for granted.
Yeah. And development and everything else as well, eh?
Yeah.
It's sad to see, but I mean, like to your point, everybody should watch it because it's a cautionary tale. It's something we can implement on our own rivers, right?
Yeah. And again, that's getting back to spreading secrets about rivers. That's why I think these rivers need friends, and we need a lot of people outraged if there's going to be some sort of proposal that affects habitat or water or that kind of thing. And if it's only your secret spot,
nobody cares about it.
Sorry, we'll
cares.
just do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, look at Indiana, right?
Yeah.
Like, we were on the White River and
Okay.
they there's a large chemical spill, and if it wasn't for the anglers showing up to the river to go fish it, seeing all the dead fish,
they wouldn't have even known.
No one would have
known there was a fish kill.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
So it's the tale everywhere, people have to care to make the river and place that they're fishing in, a place that can grow and be,
Yeah, exactly.
So let's jump in and talk about Mitchie's Fishies 5 time.
Oh boy.
Yes, 5 questions we ask every guest. Always the same questions, but really excited to get these in front of you. I kind of can speculate what maybe some of your answers might be to these, but I don't know. Let's see. I'm always pleasantly surprised.
Me too.
Okay, so let's jump into the first one. Mitchie's Fishies 5. Number 1, what is your favorite fish and why?
Well, the obvious answer would be steelhead because I love them so much. But I'm going to throw a curve at you because I love native steelhead in BC, but as a biologist, I'm really a fan of native fish and indicator fish of cold, clean water. And I'd say mottled sculpin is my favorite fish.
That's a crazy answer.
And I don't know if you know these little creatures, but they look like tadpoles. They're about 3 or 4 inches long.
Yeah.
You don't fish for them. But they're really strong indicators of cold, clean water.
Okay.
And
good trout food.
Good trout food. But they also, if there are sculpins in the stream, there are probably trout and probably brook trout.
Yeah.
Because their habitat requirements are very similar to brook trout. They need really clean water and cold water. And a little story I can tell you is there's a creek not far from where we're sitting right now called Marden Creek. And this is a project I'm very proud of in my career. I was working with the Speed Valley chapter of Trout Unlimited Canada, and they were looking for a stream that they could work on. And this Marden Creek kept coming up as a possible candidate. And at the time, we thought it was a former trout stream. We heard stories from the 1970s where people caught trout there, but they hadn't seen them in decades. So I went in with some people and we electrofished it, and we found sculpins, and we found sculpins almost everywhere. And I thought, this is a great sign. There's got to be trout somewhere.
Yeah.
And sure enough, after a lot of work, we found a section of stream maybe about half a kilometer long that actually had brook trout.
Wow.
And if it wasn't for the sculpins, I think I wouldn't have persisted as much as I did. Mm-hmm. But I said, no, there got to be some trout here somewhere. And we found them. And then we went to work, rolled up our sleeves, and we did a lot of habitat work. We removed some ponds. We removed the dam. And I'm proud to say now we have trout in Marden Creek from source to mouth.
No way. The whole thing.
The whole thing. And that's only been in the last 10 years. So we've basically brought a trout stream that was just basically hanging on by its fingernails or its fins. Yeah. And we brought it back to, something that is viable now. So that's
amazing.
Great.
That's
an
why I love
story.
sculpins.
Yeah, that's an amazing. I mean, that story's awesome. And that creek runs through town, like through a town or kind of near town?
Well, it's near, just north of Guelph. So it runs through the Ignatius Jesuit Center, if people know Guelph and that. So it's
brook
it's
trout
in the,
too. That's so cool.
It's a tiny stream. It's not a stream that you would want to fish. But and I'm bringing this up because if you go to it and you think you're going to catch a limited brook trout, you'll be disappointed. So you can jump across it.
Yeah. But it's very cool that you're able to bring it back, and
Yeah.
it's amazing. They're such a special fish too to have them in the whole thing.
I got a great
I love
idea.
that.
We're gonna send you a T-shirt. We made that T-shirt.
Which one?
Sculpins. Oh my god.
Oh, gulpin' sculpins.
Gulpin
Sculpins,
Sculpins.
Sculpins, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna send that to you.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
I love it.
Sculpin. That's cool, man. I love that answer. Okay. Number 2, if you could fish anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and why? Assuming it's the best time to go and fish that place.
Yeah. There are places I want to go. It's kind of bucket list. Like I'd love to go to Kamchatka.
Yeah.
You know,
It's so cool.
I think where I would go, and again, it would be chasing steelhead, but I think the Olympic Peninsula.
Okay, yeah.
I haven't been there yet.
Yeah.
And I want to go because they're not doing so well there. You know, I hate to say I want to go there before they're gone.
Yeah.
But I do want to see those rivers. They're pretty intact because they flow out of a national forest, the Olympic National Forest. And the other thing I'd really want to see, and I won't be able to fish it in my lifetime, is the Elwha River, that's the river in the Olympic Peninsula where they removed 2 large dams. It's one of the largest dam removal projects in North America. And the Elwha is coming back really well. And, you know, there's steelhead runs coming up and all of that.
That's amazing.
You're still not allowed to fish it, and it may be decades or years
Good.
before you can, but I just want to see it.
Just see it, yeah.
Again, that's a biologist in me. I just want to walk along there and look at it. And
See if you can spot some fish.
And just be inspired by it. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds
Great
like
answer.
amazing. I really like that it's that you can't fish it for a while, too. Like, they're actively trying to...
Yeah, it's an active restoration program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Great answer. Sounds beautiful. Number 3 is, what is your best fishing memory?
Oh,
All time.
all time.
All the years fly fishing. What's the best?
Well, I would say it has to be going to BC with my boys, my 2 older boys. They are, they just got into the swinging flies for steelhead game.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, they said, "Hey, Dad, we'd like to go out west with you." And I said, I love to share my love of the skeena with you guys. Sure. Let's do it. So a friend of mine, Rick Warwood, gave them some casting lessons, and the 3 of us went out there.
Yeah.
And the fishing was okay, but I mean, it was just being there with my family and
Totally.
and people I love, and not only that, I got funny stories. We had some laughs. You go to the bars and you talk fishing, you talk hockey, you talk whatever, and they get to meet some cool people. And I still remember my favorite memory of that one trip was my one son James. He's such a good caster, and he picked it up so quickly. He's a better spay caster than I. He was just throwing some laser beams out. And I got my phone out because I wanted to take some video footage. And he goes, "Dad, don't do that." I said, "As soon as you do that, my casting breaks down." And he turned around and he said, "See, now I'm snagged."
Yeah.
And I said, "You're not snagged. You're fishing just under the surface."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh," and he kind of and big buck steelhead.
Oh,
man.
man. That's a great story.
And you were filming.
Yeah,
That's cool.
And it was so cool. And that was his first steelhead.
Oh, no way. That was his first one.
And it was fun. It was memorable.
That is a great
That's
memory.
a great,
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, man.
And he got it in a special spot in the canyon in the Bulkley River, and it's paradise. And so that's a memory I'll always cherish.
Yeah, that's a hell of a memory. That is one nice
that's
place
wonderful.
to catch your first steelhead.
Yeah.
My God. Okay. Number 4, why do you fly fish?
Oh boy.
Why do you fly fish at all?
Yeah, it's certainly not to catch fish. It really is just to be, because it incorporates so many aspects of what I love: the entomology, the reading water, all the technical aspects. But then you just lose yourself. Like once you're in, again, when I was talking about the casting rhythm, once you lose yourself in that, it's really something. So, fly fishing is special. I still gear fish for some species, but fly fishing to me is just something. I don't do it for the fish, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. It makes a ton of sense. Number 5, the last of the Mitchie's Fishies 5.
My favorite question.
Yeah. I keep saying we're gonna make a book one day. We totally are.
We are.
With a person that we interviewed, and then the fly on the right. Because
Okay.
this number 5 is what fly pattern represents you. If you were a fly, what would you be?
Yeah. My initial reaction was just a beautiful feather-winged classic fly, that you would traditional fly, but that's not me.
Yeah.
I mean, and then the other extreme is you can go woolly bugger, but you know what? Everybody's a woolly bugger. We're all.
We've heard some woolly buggers.
I would say, again, it's kind of going to the fact that I don't fish to catch fish is probably something like a waller waker.
Ooh, cool.
Nice. It's a waking fly for steelhead. It's a surface fly. And I actually caught my first steelhead on a waller waker.
Really?
Yeah.
First one?
First steelhead
on a dry?
In 1989.
Wow, that's crazy.
And it was below Denny's Dam in
No way.
August of 1989. And back then there were some Skamania steelhead running. And they don't do that anymore. And they were rolling at the tail out. And I had just finished watching Lonnie Waller's 3M video series, and I got to try this. Mm-hmm. And so I was waking just like he does on the video, and I had something roll at it, and I kind of went, "Oh my god!" And of course, I just pulled it out of its mouth.
Yeah, of course. You panic,
you
get
freak
excited,
out. And then there was a old fellow there. We called him Scotty. His name was actually Jock, but he was a Scottish. He had a brogue on him, and as soon as he saw me, what I was doing, he remembered his Atlantic salmon days. He came over, and he said, no, you gotta wait till you feel the weight of the fish. And so he said, what you got to do is you got to say, I got you now, you bugger, and then you strike. And he got beside me, and the fish rose again, and he grabbed my hand and said, say it. And I did.
Yeah.
39 inches long.
Oh, man.
I landed that fish.
That's such a great first. That's crazy.
It was, again, on the surface, and that's why I love those surface steelhead flies. Again, they're not efficient. I'm not efficient either. I'm not a good caster. I'm not really a good angler, but I persist.
Yeah.
So
have you ever seen that guy again, or was that
the
first and last time?
He passed, and another story about him is he was mostly a centerpin fisherman, and when he died, and this was some years ago, there's a area on the Saugeen called the Flat Rock, and his cronies put his ashes on the flat rock when the water was rising, and the river took him away.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
that guy sounds like a legend or something.
Well, he was at the time. This is back in the 70s and 80s. Yeah,
that is so cool. Wow, what a crazy first fish.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is so cool. Well, that's Mitchie Switchy's 5. That's a great. I love that
Yeah.
answer. We've never heard a fly like that, so that's really really cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, how about now we talk a little bit about Trout Unlimited?
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah, of course. No, we want to know what you guys are up to. And
basically, Trout Unlimited Canada is a nonprofit organization, and there are chapters all over Canada, really, and there are several chapters in Ontario. Mm-hmm. We are the Middle Grand chapter, so our area of interest is, that area from Cambridge to Brantford and the Nith River. And we basically work with landowners and anybody who will work with us to see some habitat improvement on the river to bring, more fish in the river. And we've been at it for, 5 years, and we have work days every summer. We do tree planting days. Yeah. We do work days. Yeah. We have an annual general meeting in January. We have a Facebook page. Yeah. Just do a search, Middle Grand Chapter. It'll probably come up.
Yeah. We'll also post it in the show notes so people can find out how to help out.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And basically, if you're going to become a member of Trout Unlimited Canada, there's a box you can tick, like what chapter you want to be affiliated with. If you check that box, we get half of the dues to put in our war chest to do some more work.
Yeah.
And
that's good to know.
But you don't have to be a member to come to our work days. If you keep checking our Facebook page or get a hold of us and you get on our email list, and we'll let you know when the work days are coming up, and just show up. As long as you sign the liability waiver, we're glad to have you. So
worth checking out. I think you guys do tons of great work, and it's super important that we restore and protect these rivers.
Yeah.
Do you know when your first work day is?
Not yet. We're going to have a tree planting day. Our first work day is usually a tree planting day, and I expect it'll be the first Saturday in May, but we haven't nailed that down yet. Because of regulations, you're not allowed to work in the stream except for the summertime. So our first work day is usually a tree plant day.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the main initiatives this year? Or because we've done some work. We've done some work with the Greg Clark chapter on the credit. So if they had their Bring Back the Brookies program. Are there any similar type programs? Obviously not with Brookies.
We've been working on some small streams in the Nith River watershed, and they've been projects where we've done some work in the stream channel to clear log jams that are blocking sediment and that kind of thing. And we've been doing that for a while. One thing we are looking at doing, and it won't be on the ground this year, we're going to continue with that kind of hands-on work. But one thing what we're going to be doing is starting to do some fundraising for what I would call backhoe level projects. And that is things like removing culverts that are blocking fish migration, removing small dams that are warming up the river. And we've got some landowners lined up that want to work with us. We just got to raise a little bit of money to do that because we've been a very hands-on group till now.
Yeah.
We've gained some credibility in the landscape, and it's time for us to kind of move a little forward to get maybe a little more complex projects with some other partners involved. So we're going to be taking that next step. We're going to take it slowly. We got to raise the money. And with fundraising, you got to have a specific project. If you want government grant money or agency grant money, you've got to specify what project you're doing and kind of work on it that way. And so that's kind of our next step.
Yeah.
But we're going to continue with those hands-on projects because everybody loves getting out in the river and streams and rolling rocks.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's rewarding. It
does tons of good.
It's a blast. Yeah.
And honestly, tree planting's fun too.
It's so much fun.
I've done some stream side tree planting with the Greg Clark chapter.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's takes up you're there in the morning. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're outside. You get
a
to
little
see
exercise.
I saw stretches of the credit that not that you can fish them, but I'm like, I've never seen this part of the river, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's great to do that. And really with tree planting, it's really for the future. And I know I'm getting old enough that I can remember some of the tree planting projects I was involved in 25 years ago and going back and seeing that, they're working, they're shading the stream, they're cooling the river. And, there's been a number of projects like that on all the rivers. Credit's a good example of that. And so you get to be my age, you start thinking about what legacy you want to leave. And, the tree planting projects I'm doing now, I'm probably not going to see the benefits, but that's okay.
Yeah. I love those before and after pictures. I see them all the time, and it's like, this is the section of the river in, the 70s or whatever. This is it now, and it's like completely different.
Yes.
It's like so wild, and I'm just like, wow, that really works.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Yeah, that section we did last year, for the Bring Back the Brookies, is it's hilarious how clear, because it was cut for Christmas tree, Christmas tree planting or whatever, like a Christmas tree business. Mm-hmm. And there's just nothing. It's just the river's getting cooked.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow.
I know. It needs work.
Yeah. So it's pretty obvious when you get to the bank, the good that it's going to do. Yeah.
So when's the next time you're getting out fishing? Is it come spring, or you got a trip planned? Or
well, spring. I'm really into turkey hunting, so it really cuts down on my spring fishing, and so I probably hardcore. I probably won't get out until mid-May, late May.
There's a turkey hunt in the spring too, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's new, right?
No. The spring turkey hunting is pretty traditional.
Wow.
It's always, and my spring trout fishing is really taking a beating because of that. Because I don't hunt in the fall anymore because I love steelheading too much.
Yeah.
But in the spring, it's a real tussle between the trout fishing and the turkey hunting.
And the turkey hunting, yeah.
Do you tie flies as well?
Yes, I do.
Do you use the feathers from the turkey?
Of course. Plus the feathers are, the folks, my friends out in BC love them because they don't have turkeys in northern BC. So I always bring back a shipment of turkey feathers to my friends in BC.
Oh, that's so cool, man. I love this stuff we all do. This outdoor stuff is so cool.
I'm sitting here, I'm like,
so cool.
I moved to the country.
I know.
I argue, I wrestle with that every day.
Yeah. Downtown Toronto, man.
I love it. It's afforded me some awesome times. But
I wonder if we can ever fix the Dawn or the Humber.
Oh, I think you could.
Yeah.
I think there's, and I've read some articles about, some of the movement going on in the Don, is it the brickworks and that kind of thing. So I really think there's a lot of promise there.
Yeah, the Don has friends. Yeah. And it's wild. Like it's wild how wild the Don Valley is.
Don Valley's crazy.
For a good friend of mine, he's big into mountain biking trails.
Yes.
And he's like, do you guys understand how many kilometers of trails there are in downtown Toronto? He's like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Oh, just by St. Mike's. So. There's amazing trails.
Remember we had Ray Blades on the show, and he was talking about how his family, like his grandfather, great-grandfather, had cottages in the Don Valley.
Yeah.
And they would hunt rabbits and stuff.
I still think it's wild that, the Humber, 10 minutes from my house, they can go steelheading.
Yeah, we're lucky. We take, sometimes we take it for granted. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Larry, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you.
And for having us in your amazing house out in Guelph. And for the beers.
And for the beer. We're drinking beers. Thanks.
It's such a great time.
Yeah, it's such a nice time.
So nice of you to have us down here.
Well, I finished my 40 Creek copper pot.
Now you're onto the beers.
I'm on the beers.
Nice.
It'd be sweet to do another show here and then hit the river after. Because we're not far from the Grand right now.
Like I say, I'm going to be talking with Tyler Dunsmore this afternoon on the Grand. And so you don't need to listen to me drone on. I mean, there's guys like, if you want to know more about the Grand, there's guys like Tyler, there's Larry Mellors, there's lots of guys.
Awesome.
And gals who can talk about the river.
Yeah.
And so there's lots to talk about. Yeah.
And this afternoon we're heading to First Cast.
Yeah, we're going to the First Cast. Tyler and I are going to tag team a little presentation, and we're going to talk about fishing the Grand, the Middle Grand, but we're also going to do a little shameless plug on our chapter.
Awesome.
Yeah. As you should.
Absolutely.
I think you let us know about those. We'll keep watching your feed because we'll come to a tree planting for sure. We'll be
Excellent.
there. Yeah,
100%.
It'd be awesome to try to think of something to help fundraise as well. Maybe there's an event we can do in Toronto to get some fundraising for some of your programs.
Well, I know Rob's shop, the Drift Outfitters, has been very generous with our chapter and donating to us. One of the fly fishing film festivals, the proceeds were to our chapter. So
wicked.
We really appreciate that. And so Drift Outfitters has been a great ally of our chapter, and
wicked.
We thank Rob and the gang for that.
Oh, thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Jeez. Big supporters of us too. So and former employer. We've been doing some more work with the Patagonia store, so maybe that's something we can. Because they're always saying they'll even give us product to raffle away. So maybe there's something we can do there.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Larry, for coming on.
Well, thank you.
It was a fantastic show, and thanks everybody at home for listening. That's it from me, Mitch. Yilma.
Hey, I'm out.
Aldo.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
And Larry.
Bye.
Cheers.
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 You can find all of SoFly's content at SoFly.ca. On Instagram, we're at the SoFly Crew. You can reach us at thesoflycrew@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or concerns. On Facebook, we're SoFly, and our podcast is available on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Spotify.